always found it weird. The national obsession with which Canadian team is going to win the Stanley Cup first. And even, this channel certainly hasn't been without subscribers and even myself talking about it. And the season starts early October, and here it is, September 26th, and we're already debating about which team's going to win it first, and what your best hope is. And I honestly think it's kind of strange. It's understandable, I guess. There hasn't been a Canadian team that's won a Stanley Cup. We're going into the 25th year since it's happened. But it's sad on some level, because every time a team wins a Stanley Cup, most of its players are Canadian. So we get all these wonderful, sappy stories about these Canadian players bringing it to their hometown and taking it to families or sick children's hospital or wherever they take it, right? And the obsession with which Canadian team's going to win it first, I find it really weird, because we haven't had a team in the final for a while. And it's like the desperation for a Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup is palpable now. And it's like, the Oilers made it to round 2. Toronto makes it to round 1. And yet we're all assuming, they're going to win Stanley Cups. And, the Leafs are going to be a dynasty. And the Oilers, they're going to be a dynasty. And meanwhile, Calgary fans are like, well, what about us? And the response from most is going to be, well, what about Calgary? What about Calgary? I mean, as long as Calgary can figure out this whole arena crap, which is just getting worse. Every time Ken King opens his mouth, I think he makes it worse. And Bettman being involved makes it even worse. Because they're really ratcheting up this whole, well, we're not in a great position. If the Flames are the number 16 team in terms of revenues, and that's what's being said, they're number 16 in the league. They're ahead of 14 teams, soon to be 15. So are you telling me that the NHL needs to move 14 teams? Go to hell. Anyways, so Calgary fans have that going through their heads. And a Calgary franchise that's close to being a contender. Montreal, meanwhile, you have Carey Price. You have a defense that, interestingly enough, I will say this, if Victor Meat makes this team, and if he is good, if he's good enough to be top 4, and if he can be that mobile defenseman that they've needed all summer, he's 5'10", 174, so he has to be fast to be even on the cusp of making the NHL. This could fix Montreal's problems from within and make Bergevin look like a genius. If Drouin is the number 1 center that they've needed, and Pacioretty loves playing with him, and they're, is Gallagher going to work with him or whatever else? If Drouin's the answer, then Montreal absolutely is the contender. The problem they're going to have is if Galchenyuk is still left behind. So if Drouin's the number 1 guy and Galchenyuk's left behind, do they trade him, or do they give him another season as a secondary player? Is that what happens? Because his points per game last year were higher than the year before. But if he's on a third line and playing a diminished role, his points per game are going to go down. That's just the law of returns. So there's those cities. And then there's Ottawa. Oh, look at Ottawa. So the part that I find funny is that until a team gets into a final, and the team that got closest last year was Ottawa, and they're the team everybody's just writing off. I mean, Winnipeg and Vancouver gets written off too because they missed the playoffs altogether in Vancouver, because it's going to be a bit of a climb. It's going to be a bit of a climb for Vancouver. And the thing too is that if Elias Anderson makes the lineup in New York and Pettersson doesn't in Vancouver, and obviously he's not going to, then the Wolves are going to be out again. Oh, look, the Rangers drafted a guy after Vancouver. The Rangers are smarter than Vancouver. Vancouver again drafts the wrong guy. Ha ha ha. Benning. And then a Ulevi joke will come out right after. And then something about Jake Virtanen. So the Canucks have that to deal with. The Jets, on the other hand, are the team nobody's talking about, who absolutely have all the offense they need. I think as long as their defense and their goaltending make improvements, much like Dallas, they can make a huge advance. The desperation for a Canadian team to win a cup is understandable. But as much as Oilers and Leafs fans are shining up a spot on the wall, seemingly for when those cups come in this year, next year, the year after, blah, blah, blah. And not all fans are like this. So don't say you're saying all of them are like this. No, what I've seen online, and just the way that journalism is running it, and journalism's hyping it up because it's big ratings for them. If the Leafs and the Oilers are contenders, it's big ratings for them. Like TSN and Sportsnet and all the Canadian sports outlets had to be so happy when McDavid and Matthews were going to Canadian teams, because Canadian teams do draw big ratings in Canada. And Matthews going to Toronto really is, a match made in heaven for all the sports broadcasters in Canada. But to say this team will be a cup champion, you got to be careful. Because I've seen it with teams that have never won a cup. I've seen St. Louis in that position. I've seen Washington in that position more than once. And if anybody's going to say, well, the Oilers have done it before, not with this group. Not with this group. It's a completely different team. The Leafs have done it before in 1967 and back before that. So once expansion hit, the Leafs were gone from the conversation. The Leafs have had teams that were close. The Leafs have had contenders before. When Belfour was there, they were contenders. There were years where Cujo was the starter that it looked like the Leafs could break through and win a Stanley Cup. There was absolutely reason to believe that could happen with Dougie Gilmour at the center of things. And in 93 and 94, there was a reason to believe the Leafs had an even chance at winning a Stanley Cup. But what I find strange is when I see, well, the next dynasty is going to be, officially we haven't had a dynasty since the year 1990. Officially. And we can all argue over what that means and what that term is, but basically it's 3 cups in 4 years. I think any city should be happy with 1. The current setup, with the cap the way it is, and with salaries going the way they are for guys coming out of their entry-level contracts, I think you win 1 Stanley Cup, you got to be happy about it. I don't think, just because, Pittsburgh's got 2 in a row and they've got 3 in the last 10 years. Pittsburgh also has Crosby and Malkin, the best 1-2 punch at center in the league. So that in and of itself is reason to look at the team and go, all right, well, you're probably not going to be Pittsburgh. Chicago with 3 cups in 6 years doesn't meet the official terminology for dynasty, but they're close. Just like the 3 in about 10 years for Pittsburgh is close. And the 2 for LA in 3 years is impressive. But there's a lot of things that have to happen first. And when you're dealing with teams that haven't got out of the second round, or in Toronto's case, haven't got out of the first round yet with this group, projecting too far ahead is tricky. It's tricky. The Ottawa Senators were the number 1 team in the league and one of the absolute biggest draws. And in 2007, they lost in the final. And then they never got back. So the obsession with which team's going to win a Stanley Cup first for Canada, and I get asked that a lot. And if people ask me Toronto or Edmonton, I usually say, well, probably Edmonton first if either of them are going to get it. Toronto would be second, I would think. And then I throw in, but my bet is Montreal would be the one to win it first because they have a more experienced roster. And Carey Price is overdue for a huge playoff run. Carey Price is a fantastic goaltender that just hasn't had the support in the team to get him to a Stanley Cup, and he hasn't had that run yet either. And those things have to coincide. You look back to 2011 with Tim Thomas. Thomas had a fantastic year. The team in front of him was fantastic too. 2012. Absolute wall in net, Jonathan Quick. The defense in front of him was fantastic. So it's not just that Carey Price does it. It's that Carey Price and the defense together take Montreal to that Stanley Cup. And I still think they're in the best position. Because Frederik Andersen hasn't done it. Cam Talbot hasn't done it yet in the playoffs. And for me, anyways, there's every great goalie goes on that run. Every great goalie goes on that run. Hasek didn't do it every year, but man, when he turned it on, he was fantastic. And Carey Price, I really think, is the best goaltender in the league right now. So yeah, I still think Montreal's probably the best bet for a Stanley Cup first. But the question I always get asked is, between Toronto and Edmonton. Okay, Edmonton? But Montreal. And if you're going to say, well, Montreal can't score, there have been teams that have won a Stanley Cup that can't score. Boston in 2011, I know they ran up the score against Vancouver a few times, but Boston really wasn't a great scoring team that year. Their power play was atrocious. And that run was all defense and goaltending. So, that's really the thing. And often defense and goaltending make the difference. So it's a fun idea to talk about where Edmonton and Toronto are going to go, but even look at the last run that Pittsburgh went on. Matt Murray played a large role in that, and so did Fleury. And then the year before, Matt Murray played a large role in that as well. Goaltending and the defense in front of them is key, and that's why I said the defense in the finals last year was a soft between Pittsburgh and Nashville, because Pittsburgh's defense was playing over their heads. They were playing great as a unit. And Nashville's was great, and Nashville's is the more talented defense. But to win a Stanley Cup, you have to have great defense. And between Edmonton and Toronto, I don't know that either of them have great defense. Montreal, defensively, yes. For puck movers, probably no. We'll see if this Victor kid can do it. And if he can make the lineup, and if he can do it and push Brandon Davidson out of the top 6, Montreal's got a shot. And it pains me to say it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.